欢迎来到理想的财富自由频道，一起听书致富。记得订阅、点赞、加分享。
I enjoyed it, but it started off the performance with my report card from my just about the middle of junior high school in Washington, and from there it gets better. we started at the low point, or Peter did, and he changes it a little every time I watch. And one time out in Los Angeles, I performed with him. I had my ukulele with me, and for some reason he hasn't asked me back to do that. But I look forward to attending any of his performances. Well, I probably developed a great many of my ideas from my dad. All three of his children just loved him unconditionally as he loved us. And he was not a preacher to us in any way, shape, or form, but we picked up things from a little bit of what he said, but mostly how he acted. And the idea that all lives have equal value is something that I think both of my sisters, as well as I, felt since I can remember. I talk sometimes about the ovarian lottery, and the truth is that I'm here in my position as a matter of luck. I mean, that was the most important thing that happened to me, was the womb from which I came, the parents I had, the wiring I had, and I didn't have anything to do with that. My dad talked at the dinner table about that famous lynching that took place. It was around 1920, plus or minus a couple of years, and my dad went down and saw a mob out of control. There was a very famous editorial written in the Omaha World Herald subsequently, it may have won a Pulitzer, I'm not sure, about mob rule, and my dad would talk to all of us at the dinner table about what happens when mob thinking takes over. It obviously applied in that lynching, but it applied plenty of other places too. I didn't really have memories of segregation in Omaha, but when we moved to Washington, I went to Alice Deal Junior High School, and just a few blocks, maybe less than that, away, there was a school for black children, and I had some good friends there, actually, who were black. One of the paper boys I used to associate with, and I caddied at the Chevy Chase Country Club. I was the only white caddy there. I wasn't worth beating up, fortunately. If there had been more of us, I think there had been more trouble. But so I saw what was going on. I saw a little bit in Fredericksburg, Virginia, too, in the movie theater there. The blacks sat in a different section than whites, so it never made sense to me. Well, I helped a bit when that was in the 60s, when there was fair housing legislation in Lincoln. My wife was more active than I was, though. She constantly worked. There was a group she worked with where there was a Jew and a black, and she was the WASP, and they went around and made presentations at various clubs and that sort of thing, and so she was more active than I was, but I was 100% with her mentally. I was just working a little more on my own investments. There was an incident at the end of the 1960s where I was going to join what had been an all-Jewish country club, and that created quite a ruckus there for a couple of months, and then after it took place, then everything straightened out. The club that I'd belonged to that had turned down a Jewish friend of mine, which made me quite irritated, and was the cause for me to join the Jewish club. What existed in whatever it was, 1969, a few years later just changed dramatically in that respect. But I remember when Bob Gibson, who was the terrific baseball player, and they have something in Omaha called the Exarban Ball, which was a very, very big deal in the past. Still is a big deal, but it was a much bigger deal then. And 8,000 or 10,000 people would gather at the Exarban Auditorium for something of a civic nature and social nature. and there wasn't a black face there. And then finally they invited Bob's one or two of his daughters to participate, and that was a big event. That was a big change in the mid-'70s. There's a lot of progress that's still needed, but I've seen progress take place in my lifetime, probably more with females than with blacks. I've seen anti-Semitism drop dramatically in Omaha. Now, maybe people just don't talk to me about it when they feel that way now. But I was a member of the Rotary Club in the 1960s, and finally they put me on some secret membership committee, and I learned what some of the people on that committee thought about how they made selections. And it was amazing to me that in Omaha, Nebraska in the 1960s that people would say, well, we've got enough Jews or something like that. Well, when I got out of business school at Columbia, I had a hero there named Ben Graham who did wonders for me in all kinds of ways in my life. But when I got out of school, I said, could I go to work for you for nothing? I was sort of hoping that if he said yes, he would then decide to pay me. And he told me that his little firm, which only employed about 6 or 7 people, that there was so much prejudice then in Wall Street. And Wall Street was divided then between Jewish firms and Gentile firms. I mean, there were a couple like Kuhnlo, maybe, that were known as Jewish firms, and there would be others that were known totally as Gentile firms. And Ben said that because that prejudice existed and he'd experienced it, that he felt that to the extent that they had any employment to offer with 6 or 7 people, that they had hired up to that point only Jews. So I came out to Omaha and sold stocks and said, but I kept pestering them for a while, and a few years later they hired me. I was the first Gentile hired. I remember that speech that Martin Luther King gave, I think it was in the fall of 1967. That was one of the most inspiring speeches I've ever heard. And maybe in the last, I tried to get a copy for many, many years. And finally, about a year or two ago, a fellow who now runs Morehouse found a copy and sent it to me. And when I read it today, I think it's even better than when I heard it. I mean, it's a remarkable speech. No, I knew about King. I mean, but it was different knowing about King and listening to King. He took me right out of my seat. My wife was with me, and we both had the same experience. And of course, 6 months later, he was dead. It was interesting. In that speech, he talked about truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, but that scaffold sways the future. Well, he was going to be dead in 6 months, but that scaffold did sway the future. The genes must have gone bad, I guess. I grew up. We couldn't sit around the dinner table. They wouldn't let me eat my hamburger until we'd said a few bad things about Roosevelt. So it was a very Republican household. Of course, my dad got elected as a Republican. I campaigned for him. My sisters campaigned for him. So I even ran as a delegate to the Republican National Convention in 1960 for reasons that were sort of unrelated to the normal political reasons. I waited until after my dad died before I changed my registration. I didn't see any reason to do it, but I changed my ideas, and not in one fell swoop, but I changed my ideas in the years preceding 1964 when he died. I was president of the Young Republicans Club at the University of Pennsylvania and was going to ride an elephant down Woodland Avenue when Dewey won, but there went my moment of fame when the Illinois returns came in. Civil rights changed my views. I just felt that the Democratic, on balance, neither party cared very much about it there for a while, but I felt that the Democratic Party was more likely to do something about it. It just struck me as fundamentally wrong that almost 200 years after this country was born, that in 1776, Thomas Jefferson wrote all men are created equal, and then when they wrote the Constitution, they all of a sudden decided that, no, it was just 3/5 of a person if you were black. I mean, that struck me as kind of crazy. And of course, in Article 2, Section 1, they use male pronouns in terms of describing the presidency. They don't do it with the House of Representatives or the Senate or the judiciary, but they sort of slipped up, and their true feelings came out in that article, which is really remarkable that it's hims and he's and all of that sort of thing. 13 years after the Declaration of Independence, it said otherwise. I voted for JFK, right. I didn't actively campaign for him. My dad was still alive then. My older sister was working very hard for Goldwater, so she started something or worked with it called Gold for Goldwater. So I didn't say we think we ought to have two branches of the family nullifying each other. Well, there's an interesting story on President Nixon, in 1940, my dad first got elected in 1942, and then in 1946, the Republicans won control of the House of Representatives for the first time since 1930. And one night, Joe Martin, who was to become Speaker of the House for the Republicans, came over to our house and told my dad that because of the Republican majority, there was an open seat on the House Un-American Activities Committee, and he offered it to my dad. And my dad said, no thanks, he wasn't interested in that seat. So then Joe Martin went to a newly elected congressman named Richard Nixon and offered it to him, and that's the way history develops. I've always been fascinated by politics, and politicians fascinate me. So Nixon was a very interesting character. He was a very smart man, and but he self-destructed. One of the interesting, probably the book I'd really like to read is Why Smart People Do Dumb Things. I've seen it all my life. I've seen it in finance, I've seen it in politics, I've seen it in marriages, all kinds of things. Why smart people do dumb things? Because Nixon destroyed himself. I was able to purchase Washington. I owe Nixon a great thank you, because I was able to buy Washington Post stock very cheap because Nixon had encouraged Bibi Rebozo, I believe, to challenge two licenses for TV stations that the Washington Post had in Florida, Jacksonville and Miami. And Washington Post stock took a quick nosedive from about $37 a share down to $16. And even if those two stations had been taken away, the stock was worth many multiples of the price it got to, and they weren't going to take it away anyway. So President Nixon did me a huge favor financially when he got Bibi to challenge those licenses. Well, Katharine Graham was a remarkable woman. I mean, she was the daughter of Eugene Meyer, who was a huge figure in Wall Street in Washington. I mean, he started in Wall Street with a very small sum and went on to become, he was actually chairman of the Fed. He was, I think, the first head of the RFC. I think he may have been the first head of the World Bank. He was a remarkable man. And he had 5 children, but Katharine Graham ended up being the heir to the Washington Post. Eugene Meyer had bought it in the early 30s, and it lost money year after year after year until it finally merged with the Times Herald around 1960. But Katharine Graham, she'd been intimidated about her business ability and a lot of other abilities, both by her mother and by her husband. And she had this idea that men were going to be better at business or anything related to it than women, but she also had an inner strength so when her husband died and she had the responsibility for either taking over the paper or just sitting back and collecting dividends from it, she gritted her teeth and stopped her knees from at least knocking so people could hear them, and said she was going to take on the job of running the Washington Post company. And she backed Ben Bradley, the editor of the Post, in the Watergate scandal at a time when politicians were opposing her, other news organizations were not picking up on it. The Washington Post was out there all by itself. It changed the world, that piece of journalism. She'd earlier done the same thing, actually, with the Pentagon Papers a couple of years earlier in 1971 when Daniel Ellsberg came to the Post with the papers, and the New York Times, I think, had them first, but they were stopped from publishing to some extent. And Catherine Graham Kay said to Ben Bradley, run the presses. You don't have much choice in terms of, if it's a choice between looking to the past and looking to the future, believe me, look to the future. I've really never been much for beating myself up over mistakes or anything of the sort. There's nothing you can do about it. The only thing you can change is the future. And I'm in a business where I'm going to make plenty of mistakes, and that just comes with the territory. And you move forward. Although when Kay Graham died, I was really hit. That was a terrible time. That's probably I never thought of it that way, but I think it's fair to say that I'm anti-elitist. I don't think people have any business thinking of themselves as elite. I mean, they may have been born with the potential for more IQ, or for that matter, able to kick a football further or dance better than somebody else. But and they no doubt work to perfect their skills and all of that. But it really gets back to every human has equal value. And I could have been born. Well, when I was born in 1930. The odds were probably 40-1 against me being born in the United States. I did win the ovarian lottery on that first day, and on top of that, I was male. And if I'd been female, my life would have been far, far different. So put that down as another 50-50 shot, and now the odds are 80-1 against being born a male in the United States. And it was enormously important in my whole life, the fact that I was born in 1930 as a male in the United States. So to think that makes me superior to anyone else as a human being is just, to me, I can't follow that line of reasoning. Women, it's amazing. The 19th Amendment was passed in 1920. So we went a very long time before we even got around to codifying that. But when I was born in 1930, I had sisters, one on each side, a couple of years each way, and they're just as smart as I am. They did not have the same shot in life. I mean, they were destined, without anybody saying it. My parents loved us all equally, but they did not have the same expectations for us. The teachers all felt the same about us in terms of wanting to help us and all of that sort of thing, but they were delivering messages, without knowing it, that told my sisters that their job was to marry well. And if they decided to go to work, that they should be either retail clerks or nurses or teachers or, maybe secretaries, and that was it. So you had half the talent in the United States, half the talent that was told to sort of sit on the sidelines. And, it's always struck me as totally wrong. It made me realize how lucky I was that I was male. But on the other hand, you can look at the flip side of that and say it's quite encouraging, because if you look at what this country accomplished, only using half of its talent, just think of the potential for the future. I'm enormously bullish on America over the future, and part of the reason is that we, by some rather stupid decisions that probably weren't even thought out that much. We've sort of inherited from thousands of years of male behavior, but we essentially put half our talent on the sidelines, and we're making a lot of progress on that now, but we've got a ways to go. It really doesn't make any difference to me, except for the fact that since I feel that women have gotten the short end of the stick for a long time, that if it's a 50-50 choice, I'd rather give the opportunity to the woman. I think that I'm lucky enough in life, I know I'm lucky enough in life, to be able to associate pretty much with whom I want to in business or socially or wherever. And I think it's sort of crazy I think the ideal thing is to focus with people that are better than you are, because you will move in the direction of the people you associate with. And I advise students all of the time, marry up, marry somebody better. It can't be done mathematically if everybody tries to do it, but your behavior will move in the direction of the people you associate with. And so why not associate with the best? I mean, I've had a number of heroes in life, and associating with them has done wonders for me. I would not have been the same person. I would not have had the same fun in life if I'd been indiscriminate in terms of who I associate with over time. Well, you can start with my heroes. You start with my dad. You can move on to Ben Graham. You move on to my partner, Charlie Munger. Kay Graham was definitely a hero of mine. My wives have been heroes in both cases. They've all done wonders for me, and basically not expected anything in return. I mean, I have these friends that they do 10 things for me, and they're thinking about doing the 11th rather than whether they're going to get one in return for me and from me. And I've been lucky in life that I've never had a hero that's let me down. That would be a terrible experience to really have your belief in somebody that you sort of worshipped shattered, and it's never happened to me. Well, loyalty and my partner Charlie Munger in business, for example, we don't keep score, as to who's done the most work or anything of the sort, and in a marriage that's important. I mean, I had a fellow named Lorimer Davidson at Geico who spent 4 hours with me in a January day in 1951. He changed my life. He had no expectation he was going to get a thing from me, but I came there on a Saturday and banged on the door of what was then called Government Employees Insurance, now called Geico, and a janitor finally let me in, and he was the only one in the office, this fellow Lorimer Davidson. And he spent 4 hours with me giving me an education that literally did change my life. And you're very, very fortunate in life when you run into people like that. Ben Graham, I mean, he never asked anything of me. I mean, he just basically gave. I mean, he taught for 25 years or so at Columbia, and he was creating future competitors. I mean, I'm sure he didn't, if he took any money for it, he gave it right back to the school. But he basically was, as somebody said, he was planting trees that other people would sit under. And I've had a number of them like that. And it's been wonderful. Well, I like teaching, so it's a little unfair. I mean, it's like I'm making a sacrifice when I do it. I'm still at 84. I've got 40 schools that will come out this school year from all over, including outside the country. I have one school from Brazil that comes, and another one came from China. And a week or so ago, I had Harvard, but at the same time I had Western Ontario, and so I enjoy it. And at the start of every year, I kind of feel I'm not sure whether I want to do this again. As soon as I start talking to the students, I get energized because it's so much fun. Just looking at a bunch of people who got their futures ahead of them, they're forming ideas, they're forming behavior patterns, and they're eager to learn, and they come 1,000 miles or 1,500 miles to talk, and I probably get more out of it than they do. I let them ask any question they want to ask. I tell them, you throw them at my head. It'll be much more fun for me than if you deliver up softballs. So we can talk about investments or business, but we can talk about philanthropy, or we can talk about marriage, or we can talk about career. And I remember sometime back, there was a young woman from the University of Chicago, and the very first question I got from her was, do you have to be a bitch on wheels to succeed? And I think I convinced her that she didn't. And my guess is she's succeeding now. So you get a lot of good feelings out of teaching. I started when I was 21. Well, I really want to talk to students, and if I talk to a bunch of 50 or 60-year-olds, what they want two things. They want predictions and to be entertained. They're not going to change their behavior patterns at all. It's too late for them. Somebody once said the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. And by the time you're not going to, there's no great change that's going to take place. But with the students, it actually makes a difference. And I get letters from them that telling me how it makes a difference. It makes a difference maybe in who they marry or how they go into marriage in terms of the discussions that they have with their proposed spouses, all kinds of things about what they'll do in careers or whatever it may be. Who knows what comes out of it? But I do know, because I hear from them, I do know that it changes their lives in some way. And I have a good time too. Well, the toughest thing I have to do is if I have to fire a manager. And we have no retirement age at Berkshire. So it isn't like at 65 I can say, you're just terrific, but we've got this rule. So when I tell somebody it's time for them to leave, they know I'm making a decision about them. And these people are my friends. And I do it myself in most cases, not all cases, but most cases. Certainly if they're friends of mine, I do it. And most of them are. I do it myself. And I would give a lot of money not to have to do that sort of thing, but that is my job. And capitalism at times can be very tough, and the market system can. It's a wonderful system, and it produces way more goods and services that people want than any other system will. But with given individuals, given industries, given companies, it can be brutal. And it's up to me to have the right person running a business, and sometimes that right person runs out of gas for one reason or another. Sometimes, I've had cases of Alzheimer's and other debilitating situations, and I get on a plane and fly, and one way or another tell them that their time is up, and they usually get, toward the end they're consoling me usually, because I feel so terrible about it, but it's not pleasant, but you have to make other tough decisions. There's no question about it. It's painful, and it'll always be painful, and on the other hand, I have to do it. And somebody will have to come and tell me, but I'll understand what they're going through. I tell my kids, tell me when I'm going gaga, but all three of you better come in, because if it's just one of you, you're out of the will. Oh, I think it's largely a blessing. That is when that's when you're making decisions. I like to sit and think, and I spend a lot of time doing that, and sometimes it's pretty unproductive, but I find it enjoyable to think about, particularly about business or investment problems. They're easy. It's the human problems that are the tough ones. Sometimes there aren't any good answers with human problems. There's almost always a good answer with money. Well, I think I think for most people, it's a pretty good to remember. I think it was Bertrand Russell's words, although I tried to look it up one time and I couldn't find them. But he said that success is getting what you want, and happiness is wanting what you get. And I would say the best measure of success for many people comes from a story. There was a woman here in Omaha, a Polish Jew, who went into concentration camp during the war, went into a German operation where some of her family went in with her, and she was in one line, and her sister was in another line, and they didn't all come out. She went through terrible times. And when she was maybe 80, so I probably would have been 70, she said to me one day, she said, Warren, she said, I'm very slow to make friends, because when I look at somebody, I say to myself, would they hide me? And I would say that if you get to be 65 or 70 or 80, and you've got a lot of people that would hide you, you're a success. And it's really another way of saying a lot of people who really love you. And I would say that if you get to be that age, and people are holding testimonial dinners for you, if you write them a check or naming business schools after, whatever it may be, and nobody will hide you, I think you're a failure. And I know plenty of very wealthy people that their own kids wouldn't hide them. So I think I think if you're looking for one measure of success, just say to yourself, how many people would hide me? And there's a lot of people that have never accumulated a lot of money or anything, but there's all kinds of people that would do anything for them. And I feel that way about some people, and have felt that way. And you know your success then. No, I don't. I used to, when I was about 10 years old, I used to think about it a lot. But now, I've had a terrific life. I feel, it's going to happen, and I have no idea what happens after it. I'm an agnostic, so it may be terribly interesting. It may not be interesting at all. We'll find out. But your body gets kind of tired after a while. Mine isn't quite there yet, but I think in another 20 years, I'm not sure I would want a lot more days after that. I'm having as good a time at 84 as I've ever had, but my body can't do the same things now that it could before. But fortunately, it doesn't make any difference in my activities. Someday it'll make a difference, and I would not want to stick around in a paralyzed state. Just take, Joe Kennedy, for example. I would not want to exist that way. So I do not want to survive just to survive. And I've told my kids and my wife that just don't keep me alive just to keep a heart beating. Keep me alive as long as I'm enjoying life. Well, physically, I'm pretty well depreciated. I'm getting down to salvage value, but it doesn't really make any difference. I mean, I don't need hand-eye coordination. I don't need balance particularly or strength and so I'm not as strong as I was 5 years ago. I can't hit. I've gone out to do it, but I'd probably hit a golf ball, at best half the distance I could have hit it 10 years ago. But it really doesn't make any difference at all. It doesn't interfere with my work. It doesn't interfere with my happiness. It doesn't interfere with my thinking. It doesn't interfere with my friends. So I literally can say at 84, I may not be able to say it, a few more years, but I can say at 84 that the fact that my body isn't the same as it was earlier, it wasn't that great to start with. You're not looking at some guy that was a candidate for the Heisman or anything in the past. So I don't feel any diminution in my enjoyment of life or enthusiasm for life at all to this point. In fact, in a sense, the game that I'm in gets more interesting all the time. It's tough. The one part about growing old that's particularly tough is you lose more of your friends. I mean, that is tough. I just lost one last week, and Keogh, who was a wonderful friend. But aside from that, and that's important, but aside from that, I wake up every morning as excited about the day that's coming as I ever have in my life. I would not do as well on an IQ test as I would have 50 years ago. I can do mental arithmetic still pretty well, but I'm not as good as I could when I was in my 20s or 30s. I read faster when I was younger. My memory is still pretty good for business facts and that sort of thing. But if I'd read a book when I was 25, I'd remember it better than if I read a book now. On the other hand, I've learned more about people over the years. So I'm better actually at things that involve people judgments than I would have been when I was in my 20s. But in terms of learning a new game, I wouldn't learn it as fast now. It used to be a game called Simon that you press various buttons and things out. Well, I was pretty good at that 40 years ago. If I took that up now and spent the same amount of time practicing on it, I wouldn't be nearly as good. I've learned all kinds of things about human behavior. It's very hard to describe all the various aspects of it, but I have seen, when I was 20, I hadn't seen that much of human behavior, but now I've experienced a lot, particularly in sort of a specialized field, and so I think I'm quite a bit better in terms of particularly with the extremes of human behavior. If you give me 100 people, I can't pick out the best one to run a business. Take out 100 graduates of a good business school or something. I can't pick out the best one, but if I hear from people who are selling a business or associate with in some other way, I think I'm reasonably good at picking the ones that are predicting how they'll behave after they sell us the business or how they'll behave in other situations in the future. You still make mistakes. I have no regrets at all that I focused on. I got interested in stocks when I was probably 7 or something like that. I got interested in business when I was 6 or 7, and you know, would it have been better if I'd focused on chess? No, Bobby Fischer would have killed me, you know. If I'd focused on golf, you know, it'd be a joke. So I happened to very early on learn, sort of stumble into an area that I was going to be naturally good at. And I was better because I did stumble onto it early, and I was better because I focused on it. And obviously, if you're going to spend X hours a day on some particular activity, you're not going to do it on something else. But, you know, I never learned to ice skate. I don't miss it at all. There's all kinds of things. You get to pick what you spend your time on. If you're lucky, you get to pick. And I've been able to really decide my own calendar for the last 60 years, probably to a degree that almost be hard to top it anyway, and I'm glad I've made those choices. I get every day, and I've been doing this for decades, I get to work at what I love with people I love. You know, if you take my assistant, Debbie Bosonic, I mean, there's nobody in the world, you know, I'd rather work with than her, you know, and Charlie Munger, my partner, even though he's in Los Angeles, there's nobody I'd rather work with than Charlie, the managers we have. So I get to select the game, sort of how the game is going to be played, and I get to select the people who are going to be on my team. And if I'm associating with somebody that causes my stomach to churn, it's my fault because I don't have to do it. And I've arranged things that way to quite a degree. And I'm in a field where I can do that. If I was in government, I wouldn't be able to do it, or politics, or all kinds of things. But fortunately, I consider it the sort of ideal game. No, I like things quiet. I shut the door actually at the office because I don't want to hear anybody talking outside, and I like to read a lot. I can't read as fast as I used to read, but I still probably spend 5 or 6 hours a day reading or thinking while I read. I don't know. It's the kind of life I like. Somebody else with a different personality might like something much different, but I do know what I like, and I've managed to create an environment where I maximize it. Well, over the years, you develop a lot of filters, so you don't waste a lot of time on things. I always worry about sounding rude when people call me about a business, because usually in a minute or two I can tell whether it's going to make it through all the filters as to something I'm interested in. And I don't like to tell them that because they feel that if I just listen to them for an hour that I'll understand why they like it so well or something of the sort. So there are various shortcuts that you get. But I probably don't retain, you know, I'm retaining a particular set of or collection of information, but other people are doing it in different ways. I mean, when I was a kid, I could have told you who was the starting lineup for, you know, 16 major league teams, but there were only 8 teams in each league, and they didn't trade their players around or anything. I can't tell you anybody now, but there are all kinds of people that can. They're just collecting different information than I'm collecting, and there are people that are carrying around absolutely as much information in their head as I am, but I happen to have it pretty well concentrated in a few areas, and I do know what I call my circle of competence. So I stay within that circle, and I don't worry about things that are outside that circle that other people may be able to capitalize or evaluate. It doesn't bother me that other people have skills that I don't have. Well, my circle of competence, which has grown to some degree, but circle of competence is the area in which certain kinds of industries, for example, I can understand the future economics of. Other kinds of industries, I can't, and I have to know where the perimeter of that circle is. Now, over the years, I may be able to enlarge the circle somewhat, but the circle never gets to be all-encompassing. And Tom Watson Sr., who built IBM, said, I'm no genius, but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots. Well, he was talking about a circle of competence. And I see my partner Charlie says, it's wonderful to have an IQ of 180 as long as you don't think it's 200. And I have seen all kinds of very, very smart people self-destruct one way or another in business, or particularly in the stock market. And they stray outside of their circle of competence just because they know they're very, very smart, but that doesn't mean they know everything. And defining what your game is, where you're going to have an edge, is enormously important. And I think both my partner Charlie and I have gotten reasonably good at that over the years. Well, greed takes a run, but I would say envy does it probably as much as anything else. I mean, the reason they get greedy is because you sit there during an internet boom or something, and your next door neighbor, who you know is not as smart as you are, has just bought a new car because he did something he didn't understand, but it worked. And you say to yourself, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And I know I'm better than he is. Or maybe your spouse says to you, what's going on with the Joneses next door? You're smarter than he is, but they're driving newer cars. So envy's a big. I ran a firm on Wall Street for a short period of time, and I would pay somebody in their late 20s a couple $1 million. And this is 20 years ago when a couple million was even more than now. And they would be fine until they found the guy next to him, got 2.1 million. And then from that point forth, they were unhappy. So envy is a terribly destructive. Greed and envy get mixed up together. And the thing about envy, of course, is, as my partner Charlie says, of the 7 deadly sins. I mean, there's no upside to it. I mean, you can talk about gluttony, and at least it's kind of fun while you're eating, and you can talk about lust, and we know there's some fun there. But envy, you make yourself feel terrible, and the other guy that you're envious of doesn't even feel it. Well, it's a game. I mean, it's a competitive game. It's a big game, and I enjoyed the game a lot. The money has utility up to a point, but that point was reached probably when I was in my early 30s. Beyond that point, money had no utility, but the game was a lot of fun, and the games continue to be fun, and it does benefit other people. I was born with wiring that in this kind of economy, at this time in our history, I'm going to make a lot of money if I work at it. It doesn't mean that I'm a superior human being or anything, but I wasn't born, so that I can win Dancing with the Stars. I mean, I can't come in second or third or fifth or 10th. I can come in last, and it was pure accident. But I was in the right place at the right time with the right wiring. If you were going to make money, and I realized that at some point, and I enjoyed it, the game. And it is a game that you don't have to, it's not like being a heavyweight boxer or a baseball player or something. I mean, you can play that game a long, long time.
财富由不是来，家福需要您的爱心，菩萨保佑您。